Welcome to The Way In, where we talk to truckers about their life on the road.
Hey Blake, really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come down and hang out with us and talk about trucking. Do you want to go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. My name's Blake. I'm a local steel delivery driver. I've been doing it for about 6 months now, so I'm real green. Basically just got my feet wet. I grew up in McMinnville, not too far from here, live in Albany, and I work in Canby. Which is a little bit of a drive on top of then driving for a living. So, it's all going really good though.
Awesome. What was kind of like your life like before you got into trucking? What kind of jobs did you do, and kind of talk a little bit about that?
So before I got into trucking, I guess pre-pandemic, I was working for a kind of mobile construction company working on foreclosed homes. Spent a lot of time driving Oregon, Washington. Basically a week at home, week away, driving basically big 3,500, big 30-foot dump trailers, constantly pulling stuff around. Pandemic hit, they stayed open as long as possible. Housing market wasn't what it was anymore. They couldn't continue to stay open, so owner decided to shut down. I stayed working for family for a year and a half or so with this thought in the back of my mind that I could always keep driving. I enjoyed driving. So I kind of kept that thought in the back of my head. And, one day I just kind of decided that I wanted to, kind of fulfill that and follow that path. And, I decided to, now you got to go to school. So I decided to, kind of enroll in a driving academy and get my CDL. And here I am.
So let's talk about that. I think, when you told me at the time, I've known you for a while, but at the time you're like, hey, I'm going to go to driving school and be a trucker. It was really a shock. But, how did you choose which was the right driving school for you? Did you look at anything specific? How many driving schools did you look at? Kind of what was the process of getting into that driving school?
There's so many and there's so many different types. And for me, I just kind of picked closeness. It was basically across I-5 for me. It was like a 3-minute drive for me. Kind of all of them, everyone had their pros and cons. And, I kind of weighed them. This one was in the right price range for me. It was real close, so I didn't have to drive very far. But I looked at a couple different schools like Chemeketa, Lynn Benton. There was another driving school in Albany that I looked at, and they just didn't have as good of reviews. I didn't hear as good of recommendations from people. People said that a lot of guys had to come back and retest and everything. The school I ended up picking was Drive 160. They had a lot of good reviews. I got an app through them that'll help me find jobs. They're a nationwide company, nationwide school. So there was a lot of success stories that came out of it. They had a really high pass rate coming out of the school. So that was one of the biggest things that pushed me to them. They also had really good programs to help you pay for it if you couldn't afford it, and a lot of different programs. I could afford it. Not everybody can afford it right now. It's, $4,000 or $5,000 depending on the school. So it's a lot of money to fork out.
Yeah.
So
what was it like the first kind of couple weeks of class? Like what was that first thing? Was there any aha moments that you were like, oh, this is different, or this is maybe not what I was expecting?
The first week was just in classroom stuff. We basically a Zoom class. The guy teaching was in Illinois doing our Zoom class. We spent 8 hours just on a computer running through all the different, basically your DOT manual for your state, just learning everything you need to know to pass your test. So that first week we studied everything. That following Monday, after that week was over, we went in, took our permit tests, got all our permits done. And then basically after that, we spent 4 weeks out in their yard just learning. You started out in their shifting range, learning how to shift, learning how to, getting really good at shifting. And then, once you got once they felt comfortable with you shifting, going in a straight line, you get out on the streets, get you out actually driving in traffic, and then from there they get you in working on your backing maneuvers and your straight backs, your offsets, your 90s, working on all the different things that you need to actually pass your CDL test.
So when they had you in those trucks, were those all manual trucks?
We had three manuals and one automatic. And the automatic, it was just there because some of the classes are bigger than others, so it was just one to get your butt in the seat and get you driving, working on your backing skills. For the most part, they pushed you on getting a manual so that you don't have that restriction on your license. Because if you test in an automatic, then you're stuck with only driving automatics. And so you had a choice. If you weren't getting it, you could drive do it in an automatic, but that for the most part, they kind of prided themselves on, being able to teach everybody. And we learned on a 40-year-old truck that had been with the school for a long time. They kind of told you if you can learn how to shift this and get this shifting smoothly, you can drive any truck. And once you figure that out, and after you kind of switch into one of the newer trucks, you learn that it's not as hard as it seems.
What's kind of like for somebody that's never been behind a manual of that? Like, what is that difference? Like, what was that? Like, can you even explain it? Is it just that there's so many more gears, or?
Yeah. So there's a lot more gears. A lot more gears you got to cycle through in a faster time, and it's double clutching. You really got to double clutch, and you really got to check. Have your RPMs in check. If your RPMs are too high or too low, you're not gonna get it in gear, and you're just gonna fight it. And the more you try and fight it, the more you're gonna hurt your transmission. And those trucks, it's an expensive transmission, and you don't want to be replacing it. So that's where you get some of the the older guys have been doing it a long time. They don't, most of the time they'll tell you they don't even use the clutch. They're floating gears, and they don't teach us to do that. And a lot of guys don't say it's the correct way. Your maintenance guys don't want you to do that, but it's definitely a learning experience. And so you got to kind of forget how to drive how to drive a normal manual, and you get that out of your head, and get your double clutching down. It's easy.
Yeah. So you went through, was it 6 weeks of truck driving school?
Yep.
Right. At the end of that experience, I remember you were looking for different roles. Mm-hmm. How did you kind of get your first job in trucking? Because there's always a talk in the industry. Man, I hear it all the time. It's like there's a driver shortage. Right. Like we need drivers. So how was that experience for you? Especially during 2022 or 2023, actually, right? Mm-hmm. How was that experience for you to find a role last year?
I thought it was gonna. I thought I'd kind of fall into a job a lot faster than I did. And I spent about a month and a half, I think, looking for a job. I probably applied to 75, almost 80 different jobs.
Dang.
Between over the road, local, regional, I kind of just threw a bunch of stuff at the wall, tried to see what stuck. I got a lot of response on over the road, long haul. If it were up to me and I wasn't married, I probably would have taken one of those jobs right off the bat. I like traveling. I like seeing the country. The cons for me were being away from my wife, not knowing when I'm going to be home. Those were the biggest things for me. So I kind of stuck it out trying to find a regional or a local job. Kept hearing a lot of, call us when you get 6 months, call us when you get a year experience. And, that kind of got me down a little bit. Yeah. I ended up falling into the job that I have now because honestly, they didn't fully look at my resume. So I got into the interview, and then they realized I was fresh out of school, and it all came down to kind of their judgment if they wanted to hire me or not. They had enough drivers on staff that it wasn't going to affect their insurance a whole lot, and that's the biggest thing is they don't want to have a new driver on their insurance because it makes their premiums go up so much, and their insurance is already so expensive on a big truck that they figure that over the road you're spending more time out on the open road, a lot less stop and go. You're a lot less traffic. There's a lot less time to screw up where, you know, local, being in Portland, Eugene, some of the tight city streets there, you know, there's a lot more risk and a lot bigger chances that you're going to get into an accident or have something happen.
How did that change your perspective when you started actually trying to go through traffic and do that?
I had a whole lot more, you know, respect for truckers. You know, I kind of grew up being a little annoyed. I think a lot of us are kind of annoyed just sitting in traffic. You know, you get behind them and like you said, you know, you just kind of want them to get out of your way, and, you know, they're passing and you're like, can you just speed up kind of thing? And, you know, a lot of times you just can't. And it's not that you don't want to. You know, I got pedal to the floor sometimes and it's not going very fast. You know, I'm not going anywhere, you know. So I have a whole new outlook on it, whole new outlook sitting in traffic. You know, I'm a lot more patient and, you know, give them a lot more room. You know, we can't stop nearly as fast, can't speed up nearly as fast. We can't see half the time, you know, unless you got a flatbed and you can see out of the window because you don't got a sleeper. You know, most of the time you can only see what's on the sides of you if you're lucky. So, you know, like I said, I just had a whole new outlook on, you know, what it takes to actually be a driver and, you know, be a professional driver.
So what's like, has there been good experiences or bad experiences that you've, like, has there been anything that's like kind of changed your mind, or so, like, have you got to do the honk the horn for kids or anything like that going down the road?
You know, I thought I would get it a lot more. I think I've only got it twice. And the two kids I did honk, it made their day. You know, they loved it. I laid on it in the middle of a city and kind of middle of a residential area. He loved it. And I probably shouldn't have at the time, but hey, it was the first time I got to do it. And I keep looking out for kids, you know, school buses and stuff. But anymore now, they got tinted windows and you can't see in them. And so I'm still waiting for one. But yeah, it made my day when I got to do it finally, because I was one of those kids that's always trying to get truckers to honk their horn. And
yeah, that's always a fun experience. Like, I think every kid has a memory of that where they got a trucker to honk their horn. It's always kind of fun. So you went to trucking school, found a job. What type of trucking did you go into? And kind of tell me a little bit about the gig that you have now.
Okay. So I'm a local delivery driver, and I deliver steel, all different types of steel. And we do kind of a mix between a flatbed and curtain van, roll side curtain van. We just lost a driver, so now we have enough curtains. Basically, each driver has a curtain and a flatbed that is assigned to their route. And we haul anything from steel plate, I-beams, angle, tube, pipe, kind of you name it, you know. And we're anywhere from real small stuff to 120 inches, you know, 10 feet wide. You know, we're oversized. We pretty much anything and everything you can think of that's steel, we deliver it. You know, other than coils, we're real lucky. We don't have to haul coils. We don't have to touch them. We get them brought in by rail car. And, you know, our mill deals with them. We don't have to deal with them. So that's one of our biggest things. You know, steel coils are such a danger to truckers. If you don't know how to do it, don't know how to strap them down correctly, you know, that's a big danger to you and everybody else. But yeah, so I do a lot of flatbed work, which is nice. It's nice when it's dry. Kind of sucks in the rain when you got a tarp. You know, having to tarp and deal with your tarp every day, it gets to be a hassle sometimes.
So, like, talk a little bit about that. So, like, obviously, for those that don't know, you're a massive person. I'm saying that by, like, you're 6'5", I'm 6 foot, you're way taller than me. Right, you're a big person. But how is it moving those tarps? Because those tarps are heavy and you really have to move them around. But how has that been for you? Is that something you kind of dread every day when you do have to tarp all the time, or? You
know, it kind of depends on the day. You know, we have anywhere from a 38 foot trailer up to a 53 foot trailer. So when you got the 53s, you know, it's 2 or 3 tarps depending on how stacked up your load is. You know, our structural stuff, like our rule of thumb is if it was stored outside, and it's going to be set outside, we don't have to tarp it. But if it's stored inside, getting put away inside, we got to tarp it, you know, and that's about 50-50 of our material. It's about 50%, you know, and that's usually about 50% of our load. So you end up tarping stuff, even though you only, you know, only some of it you have to. But yeah, those tarps, those big tarps, my full-size tarps, they're pretty heavy. It probably weighs about 80 pounds or so. And it takes a lot to maneuver them around. You know, it's a lot of work throwing it up on the trailer, getting it stretched out, and that's the easy part. You know, the hard part's almost rolling it up, especially if it's windy out. You know, you got to get it rolled up real quick, and then if it's raining, because usually it is when you got a tarp, you got all that water in there, adds probably another 10 pounds to it. And
have you had one fly away from you yet?
Oh yeah, you get it almost rolled up, and then it starts flying away. You know, the wind picks up, and you end up cussing and swearing, and end up chasing it down, looking like a fool to everybody driving by you, and it's always a good time though. So we get spoiled when you get a curtain van and you don't have to tarp, and all you got to do is open and close it. It's
makes life a lot more easier.
It makes life way easy.
But what's the downside? Like, I think the thing about most curtain size though is you can't haul. I mean, you guys are hauling a lot of steel, so it's like load as a bed, right?
Yeah.
But curtain side, you can't haul anything super tall. So like, you can't haul all types of lumber, and that kind of stuff. So that's really the downside of that, right?
Yeah. So it kind of depends. We have a couple different heights on ours, you know, and you can only haul a certain wide. So our, you know, all of them are 102 wide, you know, so that's relatively standard to your standard trailer. So when we get wide stuff, you can't put it in there, and you can't stack it up too tall, and you got to be careful with those curtains because they are, you know, it's just vinyl, so they tear. They're pretty thick and durable, but they tear real easy when you get, especially with sharp steel. It doesn't take much, and they're expensive to fix, expensive to replace, and
yeah, for sure. One of the other things that I always find fascinating with flatbeds, right? If you're on a regular van or reefer, right? Those types of equipment, you just back up to a dock, gets loaded for you for the most part, right? And then close it up and you're gone. But for you, you have to secure stuff. Yeah. And for your first job in trucking, how was that for you? Like, did that make you a little nervous when you were first strapping that stuff down and learning how to do a proper load securement?
Yeah, I definitely, you know, it still makes me nervous. Steel is one of those things you never want to second guess. You never want to think you never want to cut corners because it can slide on you, it can move on you. I'm definitely always learning, you know, but one of those first couple times I was on my own, yeah, it was making sure I had stuff correct. I was constantly watching it, making sure nothing's moving. You know, using a combination between chains and binders and our straps and different, what we call them SpongeBobs, but it's load assist blocks that are basically a dense foam block to help you get pressure places where, you know, your strap isn't going to touch. And, you know, our loads aren't ever fully level where you can just throw a strap, call it good. You know, we're constantly having to do different things to make sure we got the correct amount of pressure, you know, make sure you got a correct amount of straps on your load for your weight and your length. And there's a lot that goes into it that, you know, you don't think about if you're in a van or a reefer, you know, when you just set it and forget it kind of. And
so when you went to this company, was there like a training process for how to do load securement? Kind of, how did they help you learn that?
Yeah, so I rode with the driver, well, basically the most senior driver, for about a month, and she taught me, you know, everything she knew, that, you know, how to deal with it, and every situation that I'm going to come across for the most part, she kind of ran me through. We ran through different types of loads, and they did give me what they called the Bible, which is our company's load securement, all sorts of different types of loads, different ways to strap, different ways to gut wrap, different methods to go about different things, just in case you get into a situation that you don't know how to strap it down. It's a safe way to do it, and it's based on DOT standards. And you know, they did a really good job of helping us and getting us everything we need. You know, we're not there's not stuff on our truck that we don't have that, you know, so if we need it, we more than likely have it.
Yeah.
So they did a really good job of that.
Is there like a camaraderie between kind of the drivers too, to like, if there's something like maybe it's the first time you're hauling pipe, right?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't get that in the initial. Is it like pretty good where you can still reach out to some of the other drivers and be like, hey, is this secured right? Or is there somebody at the company that helps with that?
Yeah, so they were always really good. Like if you have questions, ask. Don't be afraid to ask anything. You know, we're all here to help each other. You know, we all want to go home at the end of the day. You know, they've all told me horror stories about beams sliding and, you know, coils coming off trucks, smushing cabs, and, you know, they have a lot more experience than I do, a lot more years in it. So basically it was, if you were second guessing yourself, you know, don't hesitate to come and ask us, because once you leave here and you're on your own, you know, you're in charge of you and everybody else on the road. So you don't want to be the one to cause an accident. And so that's my biggest.
That's why flatbedding is such it's a harder job, it's a hard job. And you know, literally I was just at a truck show recently where I was talking with a flatbedder who, you know, was like, hey, we're going to move this load of pipe just 5 miles. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, it's a short distance, young kid, 20 something years old, you know, didn't wrap it quite as tight, didn't check all this stuff, and ended up losing his life because, you know, somebody cut him off and that pipe went straight through the cab of the truck. And it's like, that stuff happens in the middle of a second, right? Yeah. It's just super quick.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. And, you know, with how oiled steel is sometimes, or, you know, it gets wet, it slides. And, you know, we don't drive trucks that have enough torque and build enough speed. You know, it's what you think, but it doesn't take much. You get one car that slams in front of you. And
has that happened to you yet? Like, I mean, I'm sure it has, but how does that, what goes through your mind when somebody, like you're just starting out and somebody cuts you off, right? And, you know, you're driving with that, and that, you know, you have that super heavy load of steel right behind you. Mm-hmm. How does that, until you get used to it, how does that feel like?
Yeah, you know, the first couple times I got kind of baptized in fire. You know, right. They gave me a big truck right off the bat, and I spent a lot of time in Portland. And, you know, so probably my first week on my own, I was real nervous, had a lot of bumper, stop and go traffic in Portland. And I kept a lot of distance. I probably kept 3 times as much distance as I need to, just because I knew how people drive, you know, in a normal passenger car. Yeah. And, you know, the first time it happened with me, I probably hit my brakes a little bit harder than I needed to. And, you know, I kind of learned, like, hey, you know, just kind of let the truck do its work. You know, for the most part, you shouldn't be slamming on your brakes. Right. You don't want to. You know, that's where some of our other trucks in our fleet, I drive a big Peterbilt, the Kenworths that we have. They're a little bit newer. They have all the bells and whistles your passenger car has. It's got radar. You know, it's got lane maintaining. Yeah. You know, it starts beeping at you if cars get too close, and you know, we got cameras for our company to watch us. They're watching for accidents. If your brakes get hit too hard, they activate. You know, so cars cut you off, get too close, it starts beeping at you. The truck will slam on its brakes on its own. You know, like some of your new vehicles, and it's dangerous. You know, I don't like driving them. That's why I'm lucky that I have the Peterbilt, and I don't have all those, because, you know, someone cuts me off, I kind of just slow it down and let the engine brake do its work. And
so when driving some of those newer technologies, it doesn't have the brain and all the stuff that you as a trucker, even just 6 months in, kind of realize that is going on.
Right.
Because you're thinking about your load and all that stuff. Those computers aren't thinking about that.
No.
Right. And so for your perspective, it's not quite there yet in order to be safe, right?
Right. Yeah, and you can tell that they have, you know, best intentions in mind. You know, empty load, everything would probably be fine. You know, and if you're hauling something different, you know, hauling grain or, you know, lumber or something, that's not going to slide nearly as much, not going to move nearly as much. It's probably good.
Yeah.
But, you know, we hauling one of the most dangerous, as far as not hazmat, you know, one of probably the more dangerous loads you can haul. It's a little nerve wracking, you know, so they definitely had to go in and, you can adjust the sensitivity on it. Luckily, it's not something that's just kind of set like our passenger vehicles are, where it's just, it'll do its thing. And we were able to, turn the sensitivity way down so that the truck's not just trying to stop on its own. And so that seemed to help a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the technology is definitely getting there, but it's not quite there yet, I would say.
Yeah. So what's a typical day look like for you?
My position, we're a union shop, so we all have set routes. Once you get your seniority, you got a set route. And so I'm so new. I've just got my seniority in the union. And there's not really any open routes right now. So I'm what they call a floater. Mm-hmm. I basically do what doesn't fit on all the other trucks that day, or I got a 4-axle tractor, so two rear axles and a drop axle, and I'm registered 105.5, basically 52.5 tons. So yeah. I can carry a lot more than everybody. So if it's a real heavy load, I'm getting stuck with it. I guess I shouldn't say stuck with it, but it's getting put on me just because my tractor's rated for it. My tractor's good for it. So it depends on the day. Usually, a lot of times I'm in Portland. It's a lot of industrial areas in Portland. And a lot of it's Eugene. We deliver clear up to Yakima. We deliver all over Oregon, but it's clear up to Yakima, Kent, Washington. So we do some longer stuff, but we're all technically local. Everything's within 150 air miles. We only have one route that's a true over-the-road route. That guy loves his route. He's not going to give it up, so I won't have to deal with that. So, yeah, tomorrow I won't know where I'm going until I show up, grab my paperwork. I'll probably be Portland area, because that's usually 9 times out of 10 where I end up, which I don't mind. I like being the floater. Some of the older guys, they like their set route. They like knowing who they're going to go see every day for the most part.
Yeah.
For the most part, you're hitting the same places every day. A lot of high volume customers. You sprinkle in a few here and there that only order a couple pieces here and there. But yeah, for the most part, you're seeing everybody on a daily basis. But as far as me, I enjoy doing something different every day.
Yeah.
The way my brain works, I would rather be doing that than going to like the same places. I always try and go out a different way that I came in, if at all possible. If the roads allow me to. I don't like seeing the same scenery.
Yeah, that kind of variety is giving you so much more experience, right? Because if you had one thing where you're hauling one specific type of load here and there, then it's just like you said, it's the same thing over and over again.
Right.
You're not really learning from that experience.
Right.
But it feels like this is probably giving you so much more learning experience.
Yeah, I think I've gotten more experience in 6 months than I probably would have in a year's time being over the road.
Yeah.
A lot more just tight streets, a lot more maneuvering than what they're going to teach you in school, just because they don't want you to get in that kind of position where you're getting real tight, it's getting real hairy. They don't want you to deal with any of that. It's all pretty straightforward, what you're going to need to pass your test. And I've enjoyed every bit of it. I'm not one to get overly stressed out by a situation. They throw it at me and I'll take it as it comes and figure it out. If I get into a real tight position that I got to move my fifth wheel, or if I got to move the axles on my trailer to get around a corner, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get out of a situation. A lot of these drivers say that their smaller trucks and smaller trailers have a hard time getting in there, and then I go in there with my 53-foot 4-axle trailer and 4-axle tractor, and I'm long. My truck's 24 feet long, and then you add 53 feet onto the trailer. It's a long guy out there. So I take up a lot of room. That was probably my biggest thing to learn, is just how much room I need to take with my turns. And other people on the road don't understand that, and I kind of just pull up and hope people move, and it's like, I'm sorry. I'd say I'm sorry, and I kind of just shake my head and mouth I'm sorry, and I got to do what I got to do. But
right. So, man, so 6 months in the industry, working a lot of flatbed, like, what's next? Like, where do you think you're going to go with this career? Like, you started to get into trucking, you obviously loving what you're doing now, but what's next? I know you got to have a big plan in your head.
You know, I think my ultimate goal would be to find a really good regional job. I think regional is something that I could do more. You know, Western 11 states, something like that, West Coast. I don't really have a true desire to be a true over the road, you know, coast to coast. Being away for, you know, maybe a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time max is would be my limit. Mm-hmm. You know, I know it's a hard life being gone 4 or 5, 6 weeks at a time, you know, not knowing when you're going to get home. So my perfect goal, and I know my wife's probably perfect goal, would be that 2 week max. You know, but I'm kind of taking it day by day. You know, building my experience. So, you know, I've really only have experience flatbedding and with a curtain van. Basically only 6 months. You know, I'm kind of wanting to know the ins and outs of some of the others. You know, what do you have to say about reefers and vans? Yeah,
they're both really, really different, right? So when you look at the entire freight market, most loads are vans, right? So there's lots of opportunity there, right? So van freight, literally every single market in the country has van freight, and it moves across the country. And so vans are really, really cool just because there's so much opportunity. The hard part is because there's so much opportunity, there's a lot of competition in vans. So that's definitely something to think about. When you look at freight rates, you can also see like vans are going to be a little bit lower than where reefers or even flatbeds are. We look at freight rates, flatbeds are usually the largest, right? And that's just because of all the complexity and all of that behind it. Then you can get into reefers. Reefers are really interesting, but it's kind of a challenging space as well, because so with van freight, you're thinking pallets, you just throw those onto a van and go, right? So pretty simple, straightforward. There's obviously complications in everything, but that's van freight. When you get to reefers, you have a whole bunch more rules to follow, right? You also, if you haul potatoes one day, right, you will have to wash your truck out to go haul strawberries the next day or apples or something else, right? And so there's a lot more things that you have to think about to make sure that you're not cross-contaminating food. Like
right.
Years ago, you've seen some reports about different places that got, you know, their shipments of lettuce and stuff like that got impacted. There's a lot of things that you have to think about. And, you know, one of the biggest pieces that I've heard reefer drivers talk about is, you know, if a load gets rejected, right? I've been at truck stops where, you know, a reefer driver got a whole load of soda bags that were rejected. And when that happens, you got to figure out, like, okay, what do you do with it, right?
Right.
The broker or the shipper isn't going to want it back, potentially. The receiver's already rejected it, so they won't accept it. So then it just becomes a little bit of a hassle to figure out those pieces. So it's a little bit complicated in that aspect, because, you know, if things don't go specifically, or it can be complicated. Gotcha. So that's a little bit of what I would think about, but every single one of them has its pros and cons to it.
Sounds like there's more money, but with more money comes a little bit more complications, which can be good. And
there can be. The other, you know, part of it is like when you have in reefer, you know, for you're making sure you're strapping stuff down. In a reefer, you also have to make sure that thing's running the whole time,
right?
Making sure it's fueled up. And because if anything happens, let's say you're hauling a load of frozen chicken or something like that, and that temperature goes above whatever the temperature listed on the rate confirmation, or that, if it goes above that for an extended period of time, that whole load's now spoiled. And so you're constantly having to worry, or just checking in, making sure your reefer unit's going. So there's just all of those types of things that it's just more things to look at. Like for you're stopping every now and again to check your straps and doing all that. for there, it's similar, but it's checking the reefer unit and things like that.
And definitely a big difference, and definitely something to keep in mind while I'm looking for other work. And
yeah, I think for you, knowing you is like, I think flatbed is probably where you're going to find your most love because, you know, right now you're just hauling steel, but think about if you went to a different company that it has a little bit more variety, where you're like, all right, now I'm hauling lumber one day, maybe you're hauling, maybe not coils, but you're hauling other goods another day, asphalt material, roofing material, because each one of them it's a really big challenge. Every flatbedder I've ever talked to is like, one of the things they love about it is having to figure out constantly and keep their brain moving about how to strap that down properly and keep that
problem
safe.
solving and keeping your brain moving and getting out and actually moving around too and checking stuff it's a lot better than at least for me than just sitting around all the time, you know?
Right. And plus one of the things it is like, this is really always stuck to me. Well, one flatbedder one time told me, you know, vans bring you all the goods like coffee cups and all that kind of stuff that you use every day, right? Reefers keep you fed, right? But flatbeds build communities, right? And that's always stuck to me. They like each one has its own place in the supply chain, and you know, realistically, like building community in flatbedding is like huge, like that. Like, you know, especially like if you're going to a small community and like it's their first grocery store, right? And you're bringing all the material to build that grocery store, build that community. It's really huge, and it really has an impact on the people that you're working with. And so it's just a different, like each one has its own place within the supply chain.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the coolest parts is getting to see finished products of stuff that I've taken to different companies, you know, whether it's on some of these big barges and boats, or it's, you know, we have a company that builds stuff for NASA, you know, that there's a big difference from truck racks and stuff. Seeing the finished products is probably some of the coolest, most rewarding thing, you know. I delivered that, and that's what it turned into.
Doesn't that give you a sense of pride though? Like, you are a part of how our country continues to move, right?
And a central cog in the wheel, and just another one. Got to keep everything moving.
Absolutely.
Keep this country moving.
Well, thanks, Blake, for stopping by and sitting down with us and having this great conversation. Until next time, let's go get it.
Thanks for having me, and go Ducks.
Go Ducks.